The first chapter is Scarlet Hurts. It hurts. My head hurts. The bizarre dream full of whispers quickly fragmented, and Zhou Mingrui, who was sleeping, only felt that his head ached abnormally, as if he had been severely smashed with a stick. No, it was more like being stabbed in the temple by a sharp object with agitation. Pissed. In a daze, Zhou Mingrui wanted to turn over, cover his head and sit up, but he couldn't move his hands and feet at all, and his body seemed to be out of control. It seems that I haven't really woken up yet, and I'm still dreaming. Maybe I'll think I'm awake, but I'm still sleeping. Zhou Mingrui, who is not unfamiliar with similar experiences, tries his best to concentrate his will to get rid of the shackles of darkness and psychedelic completely. However, when he is half asleep and half awake, his will is always drifting like smoke, which is difficult to control and stop. No matter how hard he tries, he still can't help but think differently, and his distractions emerge. It's fine. It's the middle of the night. How can you suddenly have a headache? It still hurts so much. It's not a cerebral hemorrhage or something, is it? Shit, I'm not going to die young like this, am I? Wake up quickly. Wake up quickly, gee. It doesn't seem to hurt as much as it did just now. But my mind is still like a blunt knife cutting slowly. It seems that I can't continue to sleep. How can I go to work tomorrow? What else do you want to go to work? Have a real headache, of course. Ask for leave. Don't be afraid of Manager Rory. It doesn't seem so bad when you think about it. Hey, you've been stealing for half a day. A burst of pain made Zhou Mingrui accumulate illusory power bit by bit. Finally, he opened his eyes with a high-spirited back and completely got rid of the state of being half asleep and half awake. The line of sight was blurred first, and then it was blushing faintly. As far as the eye could see, Zhou Mingrui saw a desk with the color of logs in front of him. There was an open notebook in the center. The paper was rough and yellow, and he looked up and wrote a word with strange letters. The ink was dark and eye-catching. On the left side of the notebook, near the edge of the table, there is a neat stack of books, about 7 or 8 books. The wall on their right-hand side is inlaid with gray pipes and wall lamps connected with the pipes. This lamp has a Western classical flavor, about half the size of an adult's head. The inner layer is transparent glass, and the outside is surrounded by black metal. Obliquely below the extinguished wall lamp, a black ink bottle covered with reddish brilliance, and the relief on the surface formed a fuzzy angel pattern. In front of the ink bottle, on the right side of the notebook, a dark pen with a round belly was quietly placed, the tip of which gleamed, and the cap of the pen was placed next to a revolver with a brass color. A pistol? Revolver? Zhou Mingrui was shocked. What he saw in front of him was so strange that he had nothing in common with his room. At the same time, he found that his desk, notebook, ink bottle, and revolver were covered with a crimson veil, which was the light shining from the window. Unconsciously, he raised his head and looked up a little bit. In midair, above the black velvet curtain, a crimson full moon hangs high and shines quietly. This. Zhou Mingrui, panic inexplicable, suddenly stood up, but his legs have not been completely straightened, and his head is throbbing, which makes him lose strength for a short time, and his center of gravity falls involuntarily, and his ass violently hits the chair surface, made of hardwood. Bang! The pain failed to effect. Zhou Mingrui pressed the table with his hand, stood up again, turned around in a panic and looked at his environment. This is a small room with a brown door on the left and right sides, and a wooden high and low bed next to the opposite wall. There is a cupboard between it and the left door, with 5 drawers below it at the edge of the cabinet, at a height of 1 person. There are also gray-white pipes embedded in the wall, but it is a strange mechanical device, with gears and bearings exposed. In a few places near the right corner of the desk, there are things similar to coal stoves, as well as kitchen utensils such as soup pots and iron pots. Over the right door is a mirror with 2 cracks, and the pattern of the wooden base is simple. Eyes swept away. Zhou Mingrui vaguely saw himself in the mirror. Now, black hair, brown pupil, linen shirt, thin body, ordinary facial features, deep outline. This. Zhou Mingrui suddenly gasped, and many helpless and messy speculations emerged in my heart. Revolvers, European and American classical flavors, and the crimson moon, which is different from the earth, all illustrate an event. I am not going through it, am I? Zhou Mingrui's mouth opened a little bit. He grew up watching the net, and he often had fantasies about it, but when he really met it, it was hard to accept it for a while. This is probably the so-called Yigong How Long, right? After dozens of seconds, Zhou Mingrui took pains to vomit a sentence. If the pain in his head still exists, making his mind tense and clear, he will definitely suspect that he is dreaming. Calm. After a few deep breaths, Zhou Mingrui tried not to be so flustered. At this moment, with the harmony of his body and mind, memory fragments suddenly jumped out and slowly appeared in his mind. Klein Maridi, a native of Tianjin City, Hua County, Zhoni Aho, the Kingdom of Northern Lu, is a recent graduate of the History Department of Hoi University. His father was a Royal Army Staff Sergeant who died in the colonial conflict in the southern continent. In exchange for the pension, Klein had the opportunity to enter a private grammar school and laid the foundation for his admission to the university. My mother was a disciple of the goddess of the night, and died the year Klein passed the entrance examination for Hoi University. There is also a brother and a sister who live together in a two-bedroom apartment. The family is not rich, or even poor. At present, it depends entirely on my brother, who works as a clerk in the import and export company. As a graduate of history department, Klein has mastered the ancient Saxon language, which is known as the source of writing in the northern continent countries, and the Hermite language, which often appears in ancient tombs and is related to sacrifice and prayer. Hermite Sven? Zhou Mingrui moved his heart, stretched out his hand and held the aching temple, and turned his attention to the notes spread out on the desk. Only the words on the yellowed paper changed from strange to familiar, and from familiar to understandable. This is the words written in Hermes Sven. The dark ink is about to drip. Everyone will die, including me. Psst. Zhou Mingrui was inexplicably frightened and instinctively leaned back, trying to distance himself from the notebook and this line of words. He was very weak, almost fell down, and hurriedly stretched out his hand and held down the edge of the table, only to feel that the air around him became restless, and there was a faint whisper in his ear, which made him feel like listening to horror stories told by his elders when he was a child. Shook his head. Everything is just an illusion. Zhou Mingrui regained his footing, looked away from his notebook, and gasped. At this time, his eyes rested on the revolver with flashing brass luster, and Horan had a question in his heart. With Klein's family, how can I afford to buy a pistol? Zhou Mingrui frowned. Meditation. He suddenly found that the edge of the desk more than half a red handprint. Color is deeper than the moonlight, thicker than the veil. That's a bloody handprint. Bloody handprints? Zhou Mingrui subconsciously opened the right hand that had just pressed the edge of the table, looked down and saw that the palms and fingers were full of blood. At the same time, the pain in his head still came, slightly weakened and continuous. You won't break your head, will you? Zhou Mingrui guessed and turned around and walked towards the cracked pier glass. A few steps later, the figure of medium height, dark hair and brown pupil, with obvious bookishness clearly came into his eyes. This is me now, Klein Maridi. Zhou Mingrui was dazed, because there was not enough light in the middle of the night to see clearly. So he went on until he was only one step away from hitting the mirror. In the crimson moonlight like a veil, he turned his head to check the situation of his forehead. The clearly reflected mirror truthfully shows that a ferocious wound is entrenched in his temple, with traces of burning on the edge, covered with blood, and there is gray brains crawling slowly inside. Chapter 2 Situation Push. 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 Zhou Mingrui was scared by the scene before him, and even retreated a few steps. It seems that it is not himself in the mirror, but a mummy. How can a man with such a serious wound still be alive? He couldn't believe that he turned his head again, and checked the other side. Even if the distance was lengthened and the light was blurred, he could still see the existence of deep red blood running through the wound. Zhou Mingrui took a deep breath and tried to calm himself down. He reached for his left chest and felt his heart beating violently, quickly and vigorously. I touched the exposed skin again, and it was warm and flowing under the cover of slight cold. After squatting down and verifying that his knees can still bend, Zhou Mingrui stood up again and was no longer so flustered. What's the matter? He frowned and whispered, intending to carefully examine the head wound again. After taking 2 steps forward, he suddenly stopped, because the light of the blood moon outside the window was relatively dim, which was not enough to support this serious inspection. A fragment of memory came out of stress, and Zhou Mingrui turned to look at the wall lamp surrounded by gray pipes and metal grids on the wall next to the desk. This is the current mainstream gas lamp, with stable fireworks and excellent lighting effect. Originally, according to Klein Maridi's family situation, not to mention gas lamps, even kerosene lamps should not be expected. Using candles is the performance that conforms to his status and status. But 4 years ago, when he stayed up late to study and struggled for the entrance examination of Hoi University, his brother Benson thought it was an important matter related to the future of his family, and even if he borrowed money, he should create good conditions for him to, of course. Benson, who is literate and has worked for several years, is definitely not reckless, lacking in means and disregarding the consequences. He tricked the landlord into paying for the basic renovation on the grounds that installing gas pipes is conducive to improving the grade of the apartment and helping to rent it in the future. And he got a new gas lamp with the help of the convenience of working for an import and export company, and actually only used his savings before and after, without asking anyone to borrow money. The debris flashed by, and Zhou Mingrui returned to the desk, opened the pipe valve, and twisted the gas. Light switch, da-da-da-da. The sound of friction ignition rang, but the light did not come as Zhou Mingrui expected. Da-da-da. He twisted a few more times, but the gas lamp was still dim. Well, take back your hand, hold down the left temple, and Zhou Mingrui squeezes memento mori to find out why. After a few seconds, he turned around and walked to the door, and came to the mechanical device which was also embedded in the wall and connected by gray pipes. This is a gas meter. After looking at the bare gears and bearings, Zhou Mingrui took out a coin from his trouser pocket. It is dark yellow, shiny copper, with the head of a man wearing a crown engraved on the front, and the word 1. Surrounded by wheat ears behind it, Zhou Mingrui knows that this is the most basic currency in the Kingdom of Ruan, called copper penny. The actual purchasing power of a penny is about $3 or $4 before crossing. There are 3 kinds of coins: 5 pence, half penny, and quarter penny, but they are still not fine enough. In daily life, they still have to round up to buy things from time to time, after turning the copper penny in his hand, which was only issued when King George III ascended the throne. Several times at his fingertips, Zhou Mingrui twisted it and stuffed it into the slender mouth of the gas meter. Ding-dong, as the penny fell to the bottom inside the meter, the rattling of gears immediately sounded, playing a short and wonderful mechanical melody. Zhou Mingrui stared for a few seconds, then returned to the log desk and reached out to twist the switch of the gas lamp. Da-da-da-bang! A cluster of flames burst into flames and quickly became bigger. The bright light first occupied the interior of the wall lamp, and then passed through the transparent glass, casting a warm color on the room. The darkness suddenly shrank away and blushed out of the window. Zhou Mingrui was inexplicably relieved and quickly came to the pier glass. This time, he carefully examined the position of the temple and never let go of any details. After several comparisons, he found that apart from the initial blood stain, the ferocious wound didn't flow out any more liquid, as if it had got the best hemostasis and dressing, and the slowly creeping gray brain and the flesh and blood of the wound growing at the speed visible to the naked eye were indicating the arrival of healing. Maybe 30 or 40 minutes, maybe 2 or 3 hours, and there would be only shallow traces left. The therapeutic effect of crossing? Zhou Mingrui became warped under the right corner of his mouth. Silent whispered. Then he took a long breath. No matter what, at least he was still alive. Calm down. He pulled the drawer, took out a small piece of soap, took one of the worn towels hanging next to the cupboard, then opened the door and walked to the bathroom shared by the tenant on the second floor. Well, the blood on my head must be treated, so as not to always look like a crime scene, and it doesn't matter if I scare myself. If I scare my sister Melissa, who has to get up early tomorrow, things will not end well. The corridor outside the door was dark, and only the crimson moonlight from the window at the end barely outlined the outline of the protruding things, making them look like a pair of monster eyes silently staring at the living in the deep night. Zhou Mingrui put light footsteps, quite a bit scared to go to the bathroom. Into the inside. The moonlight is more prosperous, and everything is clear. Zhou Mingrui stood in front of the washstand and turned on the tap. Hua, underwater sound. He who ran thought of the landlord, Mr. Franchi, because the water fee is included in the rent. This short and thin gentleman with a top hat, vest and black suit always actively comes to inspect several bathrooms and eavesdrop on the sound of running water inside. If there's a loud noise, Mr. Franchi will wave his cane fiercely, hit the bathroom door, and shout, "Damn thief. Waste is a shameful thing. I remember you. If I see it again, take your dirty luggage and get out." Believe me, this is the most cost-effective apartment in Tianjin. You can't find a more generous landlord than me. Take back your thoughts. Zhou Mingrui wet the towel and cleaned the blood on his face over and over again. When I looked in the tattered mirror in the bathroom and confirmed that there were only ferocious wounds and pale faces left, Zhou Mingrui relaxed a lot, then took off his linen shirt and rubbed the stained blood spots with soap. At this time, his eyebrows are wrinkly. Think of maybe there are other troubles. The wound is exaggerated, and there are many bloodstains. Besides myself, there should be traces in the room. After a few minutes, Zhou Mingrui took care of the linen shirt and hurried home with a wet towel. He wiped the bloody handprint on the desk first, and then relied on the light of the gas lamp to find other residues. This search, he immediately found that there were many spattered blood spots on the floor and at the bottom of the desk, and there was a bullet from Huang Qingqing on the left-hand wall. Put a revolver against the temple and fired a shot. Clues before and after Horan. Zhou Mingrui probably understand Klein's death. He didn't rush to verify, but first carefully wiped off the blood stain and dealt with the scene. Then he took the warhead and returned to his desk, opened the pistol wheel to the left and poured out the bullets inside. Clap, a total of 5 bullets, a shell, all flowing brass luster. Sure enough. Zhou Mingrui took a look at the empty shell casing and nodded slightly as he stuffed the bullets back into the wheel. His eyes moved to the left, looking at the sentence, "Everyone will die, including me," written in the open notebook, and more doubts emerged in his heart. Where did you get the gun? Suicide, or pretend to be suicide? What can a civilian-born history graduate get into? How did this suicide leave this blood mark? Is it because I travel in time and bring my own healing benefits? After pondering for a moment, Zhou Mingrui put on another linen shirt and sat down in a chair, thinking about more important things. That Klein's experience is not the focus of his concern at present. The real problem lies in figuring out why he crossed it and whether he can wear it back. Parents, relatives, best friends, colorful online world, all kinds of delicious food. These are all anxious to go back. Pa. Zhou Mingrue's right hand unconsciously threw out the pistol wheel and tucked it back again and again. Well, this period of time is not much different from the past, just a little unlucky. How could it be inexplicably crossed? Unlucky? By the way, I made a transshipment ceremony before dinner tonight. A flash of lightning flashed across Zhou Mingrue's mind, illuminating his memory covered by fog. As a qualified keyboard politician, keyboard historian, keyboard economist, keyboard biologist, and keyboard folklorist, I always claim to know a little about everything. Of course, my best friend often laughs at knowing a little about everything, and magic is one of them. Last year, when I went back to my hometown, I found a vertical version of the Minutes of the Mysteries of Qin and Han Dynasties in an old bookstall. It looked very interesting, and I thought it would help me to pack it on the internet, so I bought it back. Unfortunately, my interest came quickly, and I went quickly. The vertical version made people feel bad about reading, so I just turned over the beginning and threw the book into the corner. That I didn't remember that there was a transshipment ceremony at the beginning of the Magic Minute, until I was unlucky in the last month, lost my mobile phone, customers ran away, made mistakes in work, and bad things came in turn, and the requirements were extremely simple, without any foundation. Just get 4 servings of staple food in the area, and put them in the 4 corners of the room, which can be on the table, cupboard, and other places, then stand in the middle of the room and walk out of a square in 4 steps counterclockwise. The first step is to meditate sincerely on Fuxing Xian Huang Xianzun. The second step is to meditate on Fuxing Xian Huang Tianjun. The third step is to meditate on Fuxing Xian Huang God. And the fourth step is to meditate on Fuxing Xian Huang Tianzun. With the mentality of free money anyway, I dug out the book myself and made it before dinner as required. However, nothing happened at that time. Who knows, in the middle of the night, I actually crossed through. It must be the transshipment ceremony. Well, try it here tomorrow. If it's really because of it, then I hope to wear it back. Zhou Mingrue stopped shaking the revolver and sat up straight. Anyway, I have to give it a try. A dead horse must be treated as a living horse, doctor. P.S. Tomorrow night, make up a chapter on the book, Manual Funny. The first one in the morning tonight, the second one at 12:30 noon, and the third one at 7:00 p.m. The third chapter, Melissa, first more recommended votes. When the plan was determined, Zhou Mingrue suddenly had a backbone, and all his fears, wandering and uneasiness, were curled up in the corner. Until this time, he didn't have the mood to carefully examine Klein residual memento mori. Zhou Mingrue habitually stood up, closed the pipe valve, watched the wall lamp fade slowly until it went out, and sat down again. While unconsciously rubbing the brass wheel of the pistol, he held his head down and quietly remembered, in the crimson darkness, just like the most attentive audience in the cinema. Perhaps influenced by the bullet passing through, Klein's memory is like broken glass, which not only loses its coherence, but also obviously lacks content in many places, such as where the exquisitely crafted revolver came from, whether it was suicide or homicide. What does the phrase, "everyone will die, including me," mean in the notebook? And whether he participated in strange things 2 days before the incident, not only these specific memories have become fragments and incomplete, but also the knowledge they have mastered. At present, Zhou Mingrue believes that if Klein returns to college, he may not graduate, even if he actually leaves the campus for a few days, and he is not relaxed at all. 2 days later, I have to attend an interview in the history department of Tianjin University. The universities in the Kingdom of Ruan have a tradition that graduates don't stay in school directly. The tutor gave a letter of recommendation from Tianjin University and Backlund University, while Zhou Mingrue was silently watching. The red moon outside the window tilted west and gradually sank until the light in the east lit up and the horizon was stained with gold. At this time, there was movement coming from the inner room, and soon, footsteps leaned against the isolation door. Melissa's awake. She's on time as always. Zhou Mingrue smiled. Influenced by Klein's memory, he had a feeling of seeing his own sister for Melissa. However, I didn't have my own sister. He immediately spat out a sentence. Melissa, unlike Benson and Klein, didn't finish her initial education in the Sunday school of the Goddess of Night Church. When she reached the school age, the Kingdom of Ruan promulgated the elementary education law, established the lower and middle education committees, and provided special funds and increased investment. However, in the past 3 years, many public elementary schools have been established on the premise of enrolling many religious schools, strictly maintaining the principle of religious neutrality, and not involving disputes between the Lord of the Storm, the Goddess of Night, and the Church of Steam and Machinery. Compared with a Sunday school that only uses 1 copper penny a week, the tuition fee of 3 pence a week in public elementary schools is quite expensive, but the former only studies 1 day a week on Sunday, while the latter has to attend classes for 6 days a week. On the whole, the low price is almost free. Unlike most girls, Melissa likes gears, clockwork, bearings, and other things since she was a child, and she is determined to be a steam mechanic. Benson, his eldest brother, who has suffered from cultural losses and understands the importance of education, supports his sister's dream just like Klein's university education. After all, Tianjin Technical School can only be regarded as a secondary education, and there is no need to accumulate in grammar schools or public schools. Last July, 15-year-old Melissa passed the entrance examination and became a member of the Department of Steam and Machinery of Tianjin Technical School, and her weekly tuition fee was raised to 9 pence. At the same time, the import and export company that Benson worked for was affected by the situation in South China, and both the profit and the business volume were greatly reduced, so he had to lay off more than one-third of his staff. In order to keep his job and maintain his life, Benson could only accept more arduous tasks, and he had to work overtime frequently or go to places with bad environment for business trips. Just like these days, Klein didn't want to help his brother, but he was born as a commoner and admitted to a general grammar school. As soon as he entered the university, he strongly felt his own shortcomings. For example, as the source language of all countries in the North China, Ancient Saxon was something that had to be learned from an early age for aristocratic children and children of the rich class, and he didn't come into contact with it until the university. There are many similar aspects. Klein almost exhausted all his strength, often staying up late and getting up early, and barely caught up with others and graduated with moderate grades. Memories of his brother and sister jumped in Zhou Mingrui's mind until he turned his hand, and the door of the inner room creaked open. He suddenly woke up and remembered that he was holding a revolver in his palm. This is a semi-regulated item. It will scare the children. And the wound on my head. Seeing that Melissa was about to come out, Zhou Mingrui held down his temple and hurriedly opened the desk drawer, threw the revolver in, and smashed it with a bang. What happened? Melissa heard the noise and looked up doubtfully. She is in the most youthful stage. Even if she can't eat anything good, her face is thin and slightly pale, and her skin is still full of luster and exudes the breath of a girl. Seeing his sister's brown eyes, Zhou Mingrui tried to be calm, picked up something close to his hand, and then calmly closed the drawer to cover up the existence of the revolver, while the touch of his other hand at the temple made him sure that the wound had healed. What he took out from the drawer was a silver-white pocket watch with vine branches and leaves. When the top was pressed gently, the cover bounced off. It is the father of 3 brothers and sisters, the most valuable thing left by the Royal Army Staff Sergeant, but the second-hand goods are second-hand. In recent years, problems will occur from time to time, even if they are repaired by a watchmaker. This makes Benson, who likes to wear it to raise his status, repeatedly embarrass himself and simply leave it at home. Did I have to say that Melissa may really have a gift for machinery? After mastering the theoretical knowledge, she began to pound this pocket watch with the tools of the technical school and recently claimed to have repaired it. Zhou Mingrui watched the watch cover bounce off, saw the second hand stop, subconsciously turned the top, and planned to wind the pocket watch. However, he twisted several times, but there was still no sound of clockwork tightening, and the second hand remained motionless. It seems to be broken again. He looked at his sister with nothing to say. Melissa glanced at him blankly, quickly came over and took the pocket watch. She stood in situ, first pulled up the button at the top of her pocket watch, and after only a few turns, there was a click of the second hand. And normally, pulling up should not be to adjust the time. Zhou Mingrui's expression suddenly became dull. At this time, the bell of the distant cathedral clanged, 6 times in a row, long and ethereal. Melissa listened carefully, then pulled up the button at the top of the pocket watch, and then twisted it continuously to set the time. All right, she said briefly without any motion, then pressed back to the top and returned the pocket watch to Zhou Mingrui. Zhou Mingrui smiled back awkwardly and politely. Melissa took another deep look at her brother, turned to the cupboard, took a toothbrush, towel and other things, slid out the door, and went to the public bathroom. How did her expression just have a taste of disgust and helplessness? Caring for the eyes of mentally retarded brothers? Zhou Mingrui shook his head and laughed, snapped the watch cover closed, and snapped it open. Repeating this action, he thought of a problem divergently. Without a silencer, Klein committed suicide. Well, for the time being. His suicide was definitely not small, and Melissa, who was separated by a wall, was unaware of it. Is she sleeping too fast? Or is Klein's suicide itself full of weirdness? Pa, open, click, close. Melissa came back from washing, and what she saw was her brother's unconscious action of constantly opening and closing the lid of his pocket watch. Her eyes once again mixed with helpless, sweet voice said, Klein, you take out all the rest of the bread. Remember to buy new ones today as well as meat and peas. You are about to attend the interview. I will make lamb stew with peas for you. While speaking, she moved the stove out of the corner, made a fire with the remaining charcoal, and boiled a pot of hot water. Before the water boiled, she opened the bottom drawer of the cupboard, took out a can of inferior tea like a baby, spilled a dozen pieces into the pot, and pretended that it was real tea. One person poured 2 large glasses, and Melissa and Zhou Mingrui shared 2 pieces of rye bread with tea. There is no mixed sawdust, and there is not much gluten, but it is still not delicious. Zhou Mingrui is weak and hungry now, relying on tea, swallowing bread while condescending. After a few minutes, Melissa finished eating, gathered her black hair hanging down to her vest, and looked at Zhou Mingrui's way. Remember to buy new bread. Only 8 pounds. The weather is hot. Too much is easy to break. And lamb and peas, remember. It was caring for nerd brother but also emphasized that. Zhou Mingrui smiles and nods. Okay. As for the pound of Wen Kingdom, Zhou Mingrui thinks that it is close to his customary pound, that is, 0.5 kilograms, according to Klein's flesh measurement memory and his own comparison. Melissa didn't say anything more, got up and tidied up, packed the last loaf of bread for lunch, put on the worn gauze hat left by her mother, picked up her own sewing bag for books and stationery, and prepared to go out. Today is not Sunday. She has to attend classes all day. It takes about 50 minutes to walk from this apartment to Tianjin Technical School. There is a coach, 1 penny per kilometer. The maximum limit in the city is 4 pence, and the suburb is 6 pence. In order to save money, Melissa always goes out early and walks there by herself. Just opened the door, she stopped again, half-turned body way. Klein, don't buy too much lamb and peas. Benson may not come back until Sunday. Well, remember that bread is only 8 pounds. Good. Zhou Mingrui had no choice but to answer. At the same time, he silently recited the word Sunday several times. In the northern mainland, a year is also divided into 12 months, ranging from 365 days to 366 days a year, and there are also 7 days in a week. The previous achievements in astronomy made Zhou Mingrui suspect that this is a parallel world, while the latter originated from religion, because there are 7 orthodox gods in Peking University: the eternal sun, the lord of storms, the god of knowledge and wisdom, the goddess of night, the mother earth, the god of war, the god of steam and machinery. After seeing his sister close the door and leave, Zhou Mingrui suddenly sighed and quickly moved his mind to the transshipment ceremony. Sorry, I really want to go home. P.S. Ask for recommended votes on Monday the 4th chapter divination. Second more recommended votes. Sit back in the chair. Until the church bell rang again in the distance, 7 times in a row, and Zhou Mingrui stood up slowly, came to the cupboard and took out his clothes, black waistcoat, suit of the same color, trousers with slightly tight ankles, a half-top hat, and a faint smell of books make Zhou Mingrui look at himself in the mirror as if he were watching an English drama telling Victorian stories. I'm not going for an interview. I'm just buying a dish and preparing the materials for the transshipment ceremony. Suddenly, he muttered in a low voice and shook his head. Klein is so worried about the upcoming interview that it becomes a physical instinct. When he is not focused enough, he habitually wears this only decent suit. Breathe a sigh of relief. Zhou Mingrui took off his formal suit and vest, put on an old brown coat, and changed his head to a felt hat with the same color and round edge. After packing himself, he paced to the high and low bedside, lifted the cushion above, put his hand into the inconspicuous hole at the bottom, groped for a while, and found the interlayer. When his right hand came back, there was already a roll of banknotes in his palm, about 7 or 8, with a dark green and white color. This is all Benson's savings at present, even including the living expenses for these 3 days. Among them, there are only 2 5-sul notes, and the rest are all 1 sul. In the monetary system of the Kingdom of Ruan, sul is located on the 2nd floor, which is derived from ancient silver coins. 1 sul is equal to 12 coppers, with 1 and 5 denominations. At the top of the currency is the golden pound, which also belongs to paper money, but it is guaranteed by gold and directly linked. 1 golden pound is equal to 20 suls, and there are 3 denominations: 1, 5, and 10. Zhou Mingrui unfolded the banknotes and smelled a very light and special ink fragrance. This is the smell of money. Perhaps it came from Memento Mori's influence of Klein, or perhaps it was because of his unchanging thirst for money. At this moment, Zhou Mingrui felt that he fell in love with these little guys. Look, their designs are so exquisite that George III, who has 2 mustaches and is serious and stuffy, looks so cute. Look, the watermark seen through the sun is so attractive, and the well-designed anti-counterfeiting label makes it completely different from the fake enchanting bitch. After enjoying it for dozens of seconds, Zhou Mingrui drew out 2 pieces of paper money, rewound the rest, and stuffed it back into the interlayer inside the cushion. Smoothing the cloth near the hole, Zhou Mingrui folded the 2 banknotes neatly and put them in the pocket on the left side of the brown coat, separated from the pennies in his trouser pocket. To do all this, he put the key in his right pocket, took a big dark brown paper bag, and walked quickly to the door. Ta-da, da-da, footsteps from fast to slow, and finally stop. Zhou Mingrui stood by the door, his brow wrinkled. There are many doubts about Klein's suicide. Will there be any accidents if he goes out like this? After a moment's meditation, Zhou Mingrui returned to his desk, opened the drawer, and took out the revolver with a shiny brass. This is the only self-defense weapon he can think of, and it is also a powerful enough weapon. Although he has never practiced shooting, just pulling out this pistol can definitely scare people. Touching the cold metal wheel, Zhou Mingrui stuffed the pistol into the pocket where the paper money was, clenched the paper money in his palm, and pressed the gun handle tightly with his fingers, perfectly hiding it. A sense of security arises spontaneously, and he who ran, who knows a little about everything, has a concern. Will it be fired by mistake? Ideas poured in, and Zhou Mingrui quickly found the train of thought. He pulled out his pistol, swung the wheel to the left, turned the bomb nest vacated by suicide to the position to be fired, and then snapped it together. In this way, even if there is a fire, it is just a blank bomb. Restuffed the pistol. Zhou Mingrui's left hand was inserted in his pocket like that, and he no longer took it out. He pressed his hat with his right hand, opened the door, and slammed out. During the day, the corridor is still dark, and the sunlight that can penetrate through the window at the end is quite limited. Zhou Mingrui quickly went down the stairs and left the apartment before he felt brilliant and warm. At this time, although it is near July, it belongs to midsummer, but Tianjin is located in the north of Ruin Kingdom, which has unique climate characteristics. The highest temperature in a year is less than 30 degrees Celsius on the Earth, and it is even cooler in the morning. In some places on the street, dirty water flows and debris is littered. In Klein's memory, even in places where low-income people live, even if they have sewers, similar scenes are not uncommon because there are many people and because of life to come on, delicious fried pork fish. Hot and fresh dooli soup, drink a bowl in the morning and be refreshed all day. Fresh fish from the port, only 5 pence each. Muffins, eel soup with ginger beer. Conk. The vegetables just collected by the farm outside the city are cheap and fresh. Mobile street vendors selling vegetables, fruits, and cooked food shout loudly and greet people in a hurry. Some of them will stop and compare their purchases carefully, while others will wave impatiently because today's work has not yet landed. Zhou Mingrui smelled the stench and fragrance of the air. His left hand firmly held the gun handle and clenched the paper money, while his right hand held down the round felt hat, bent slightly and bowed his head through this noisy street. Where there are many people, there are thieves. Especially in this block, there are many poor people who are semi-unemployed and do temporary work and hungry children who are driven by people along the way. When the surrounding crowd density returned to normal, Zhou Mingrui straightened his back again, raised his head, and looked at the street. There is a wandering accordion musician playing, and the melody is melodious and warm. Beside him, there are many children in rags and sallow complexion due to malnutrition. They listened to the music, followed the beat, twisted their bodies according to instinct, and danced their own dances. Their faces were full of happiness, just like they were a little prince and an angel. A woman with a numb expression passed by. Her skirt was dirty and her skin was dulled. Her eyes were dull, and only when she looked at the group of children did a little light flash, as if she had seen herself 30 years ago. Zhou Mingrui overtook her, turned to another street, and stopped in front of Slim Bakery. The owner of the bakery is a 70-year-old grandmother named Wintislin. Her hair is all gray, and her face is always filled with a gentle smile. Since Klein can remember, she has been selling bread and cakes here at Well. Her own baked Tianjin cake and lemon cake are very delicious. Zhou Mingrui swallowed and smiled. Mrs. Slim, 8 pounds of rye bread. Oh, little Klein, where's Benson? Haven't you come back yet? Wendy asked smilingly. There are still a few days. Zhou Mingrui answered vaguely to Wendy with rye bread and sighed. He's really a hardworking guy and will have a good wife. Speaking of which, her mouth rose, slightly naughty smile. Now you have graduated, our history graduate from Hoa University. Well, you will make money soon. You shouldn't live in an apartment like this. At least you have your own bathroom. Mrs. Slim, you really look like a young and lively lady today. Zhou Mingrui can only respond quickly. If Klein can successfully pass the interview and become a lecturer at Tianjin University, the whole family will really go straight to a well-off society. In his memento mori, he even fantasized about renting a suburban single-family house with 5 or 6 rooms upstairs, 2 bathrooms, a big balcony, 2 rooms downstairs, a dining room, a living room, a kitchen, a bathroom, and an underground storage room. This is not an extravagant hope. Even if a lecturer at Tianjin University is internship, he can get a weekly salary of 2 pounds, and after becoming a full member, it will be 3 pounds and 10 souls. You know, Klein's brother Benson has worked for many years, and his weekly salary is only 1 pound and 10 souls. Still exists and is still fighting against the danger of growing in the dark, but the number is much less than that in the early or before the Black Iron Age. Zhou Mingrui listened intently, but his body movements tried to show his indifference to listening to children's stories. Relying on Klein's residual historical knowledge, he knew that the Black Iron Age refers to the current era, that is, the Fifth Age, which began 1,349 years ago. Audrey listened quietly and breathed a sigh of relief. Sir, I know everything you said, even more, such as the night watchman, such as the penalty taker, such as the mechanical heart, but I don't want to lose my freedom. Alger low laugh, vague way, which have become extraordinary. Don't want to pay the price? If you don't consider joining the church and being tested, then you can only go to the royal family, find the nobles whose family history is more than 1,000 years, or rely on luck to find those evil organizations hiding. Audrey subconsciously drummed cheeks, and then left C right to C in a panic, such as sure, Mr. Mystery, and the other guy didn't notice his little affectations. Just ask away. Is there no other way? Alger fell silent. After a dozen breaths, he turned his head and looked at Zhou Mingrui, the Mr. Mystery, who watched silently, see each other noncommittally. He didn't look back to Audrey, said, I actually have 2 potions of Sequence 9 in my hand. Sequence 9? Zhou Mingrui muttered to himself. Really? Which 2 copies are it? Audrey clearly knows what the potions of Sequence 9 represent. Alger leaned back, and the tone was unpleasant and slow to answer. You know, if human beings want to be truly extraordinary, they can only rely on potions, and the name of potions comes from Blasphemy Slate. After continuous translation in Giant language, Elvish language, Ancient Hermes language, Ancient Saxon language, and Contemporary Hermes language, they have long changed in line with the characteristics of the times. The name is not the key, but whether it represents the core symbol of this potions. I have a recipe of Sequence 9 in my hand, one of which is called Sailor. It can make you have excellent balance ability. Even in a storm-shrouded ship, you can walk freely like the earth. You can also get excellent strength and magic scales hidden under your skin, which will make you as hard to catch as a fish, as flexible as a sea family in the water, and you can easily dive for at least 10 minutes without any equipment. Sounds great. The sea relatives of the Lord of the Storm? Audrey asked half expectantly and half verifiably. In ancient times, it was really called the Sea Relatives. Alger didn't pause and continued. The second recipe of Sequence 9 is called Audience, but I don't know what it was called in ancient times. This potion can give you outstanding spirit and keen observation. I believe that you have seen operas and dramas, and you can understand the meaning of the audience. Like a bystander, you can look at the actors in secular society and get a glimpse of their real thoughts from their expressions, their manners, their oral habits, and their unknown actions. Speaking of which, Alger emphasized, you must remember that whether it is a luxurious banquet or a busy street, the audience will always be the audience. Audrey eyes shine. Good half-day just way. Why? Well, this is a follow-up question. I think I like this feeling. Audience. How can I get the formula of audience? What to exchange with you? Alger, like ready, sync of voice replied. Ghost shark's blood, at least 100 milliliters of ghost shark's blood. Audrey first excited to nod, and then worry asked, if I can get it, how can I give it to you? How can I ensure that after you get the blood of the ghost shark, you will give me the formula of the magic medicine and the truth of this formula? Alger tone usual way. I will give you an address, and when I receive the ghost shark blood, I will send you the formula back, or I will tell you directly here. As for the guarantee, I think if you have the witness of this mysterious lord, you and I will be relieved enough. When he said this sentence, he turned his attention to Zhou Mingrui, who was sitting in the first place. Sir, you can bring us here with great power that we can't imagine. Neither I nor she dares to violate your testimony. Yes. Audrey's eyes lit up and she agreed. In her view, Mr. Mystery, whose means are unimaginable, is indeed a testimony of enough authority. How dare you and the guy opposite you cheat him? Audrey half turned the body, sincerely looked at Zhou Mingrui. Sir, please be a witness to our transaction. This time, she found that she had forgotten a problem, too impolite, busy, and asked, Sir, what shall we call you? Alger nodded slightly, followed by solemn asked, Sir, what shall we call you? Zhou Mingrui paused, put his fingers on the bronze long table and tapped, and Horan flashed the contents of divination before. He leaned back, took back his right hand, crossed his fingers against his chin, and smiled at the 2 men. You can call me. Speaking of which, he paused and spoke softly and flatly. Fool. Chapter 7 Code Name. You can call me a fool. The short answer quickly disappeared in the grand temple and the diffuse fog, but in the hearts of Audrey and Alger, the voice echoed for a long time, causing ripples around. I didn't expect it, but I thought it should be the name of this feeling, which perfectly reflects the name of mysterious, powerful, and strange images. After a few seconds of silence, Audrey stood up, raised her skirt, bent her knees, and made a ceremony for Zhou Mingrui. Dear Mr. Fool, please allow me to take the liberty to beg, can you be the witness of our transaction? A little thing. Zhou Mingrui thought sharply and replied in a way consistent with his identity. It's our pleasure, Mr. Fool. Alger also stood up with his right hand on his chest and bent down to salute. Zhou Mingrui right hand pressure, smile. You go on. Alger nodded, sat down again, and looked at Audrey's way. If you can get the ghost shark's blood, send it to the Warrior and the Sea Bar in Pelican Street, White Rose District, Pulitzer Port, and tell the boss Williams that this is what the captain wants. After I confirm, will you give me the address to send the potion formula, or let me tell you directly here? Audrey thought for a moment, smile way. I choose a more confidential way, right here, although it tests my memory. Since Mr. Fool promised to witness the transaction, it means that there will be another similar party. Thinking about these, she suddenly interrupted her head and looked at Zhou Mingrui with shining eyes and suggested with great interest, Mr. Fool, do you mind trying this more often? Alger, composed after hearing, is also a crush, busy chimed in. Mr. Fool, don't you think this kind of party is very interesting? Although your strength is beyond our imagination, there are always areas in the world that you don't know and are not good at. The lady opposite is obviously of noble birth, and I also have my own experience, knowledge, channels, and resources. And I may be able to help you do trivial things that are inconvenient for you at some time in the future. In his view, since he will be dragged here defenseless and without resistance, it means that the initiative is in the hands of the mysterious Mr. Fool. He does not want to refuse to participate in the party, after thinking, and he will certainly succeed. Therefore, it is better to dig deeper and better into the benefits of this encounter, and make up for the passive and unfavorable with gains. The three parties at the long table have different backgrounds, different resources, different news channels, and different mysterious fields. If they can communicate with each other and cooperate in a limited way, they will have wonderful effects that cannot be estimated and measured. For example, the exchange of resources just decided. For example, if you want to kill someone, you can ask the party members who have nothing to do with you on the surface or in essence, which will make things perfectly misled in the other direction. Miss of noble birth. Is my performance and my accent so obvious? Audrey, mouth half open, dazed, but she quickly returned to absolute being, nodded without hesitation. Mr. Fool, I think this is a very good proposal. As long as the party becomes regular, some things can be handed over to us if it is inconvenient for you to come forward. Of course, it is within our ability. Since just now, Zhou Mingrui has been weighing the pros and cons. More parties can really help him gain more extraordinary mysteries and occult knowledge, which will help him to cross back in the future. For example, the audience formula that should appear at the next party can also get news and help for the current real life. However, the more parties there are, the easier it is to expose their own reality. Sure enough, no matter which world, there is nothing but good. Zhou Mingrui stretched out his right hand again and tapped the edge of the long table with his finger, considering that the convening and dissolution of the party are under his own control. Even if any problems are exposed, they are within the controllable range, and the benefits obviously outweigh the disadvantages. Zhou Mingrui quickly made a decision. He tapped the action to stop, to meet the four expectations, and uneasy eyes laughed. I am a person who likes equal exchange. I won't let you help unconditionally. Every Monday, at 3 o'clock in the afternoon, try to be alone. When I try a few more times and figure out something, maybe you can ask for leave in advance without worrying about being in an inappropriate situation. This is agreed to Alger and Audrey's proposal. Audrey has just turned 17 and has always been cared for. The girl is very heavy-hearted. When she heard Mr. Fool's answer, she couldn't help but clench her fist and gently put it on her chest twice. That we should give yourself a title. After all, you can't communicate with your real name. Before Alger spoke, her eyes were bright and she said cheerfully, although I may not be able to hide my true situation from Mr. Fool, the guy opposite is also in some danger, so I can't let him know who I really am. Good idea. Zhou Mingrui answered briefly and easily. Audrey immediately used her head, thinking, and said, You are Mr. Fool from Tarot. As a regular, long-term, and secret party, the title should be as consistent as possible. Well, I'll choose from Tarot. Her tone slowly became happy. Yes, my title is Justice. This is one of the 22 main cards of Tarot. And you, sir? Audrey looked at the opposite companion cheerfully. Alger frowned, immediately stretched away, hanging people upside down. This is another main card. Okay, then we're the founding members of the Tarot Club. Audrey blurted out happily first, and then looked at Zhou Mingrui, who was shrouded in gray fog, a little timidly. Is that all right, Mr. Fool? Zhou Mingrui funny shook his head. You can make your own decisions about such a small matter. Thank you. Audrey was obviously excited. Then, she looked at Alger. Upside down, sir. Can you repeat the address just now? I am afraid that my memory is not deep enough. No problem. Alger was quite satisfied with Audrey's seriousness and repeated the address. After meditation for 3 times, Audrey cheerfully added, I heard that tarot cards are just games invented by Russell the Great, but they don't actually have the function of divination? No, most of the time, divination comes from oneself. Everyone is spiritual, and they can communicate with the spiritual world and feel the information about themselves at a higher level. It's just that ordinary people can't perceive this, let alone interpret the obtained tips. When they use divination tools, these information will be presented with the help of tools. A simple example, dreams and dream interpretation. Alger took a look at Zhou Mingrui, and when he didn't say anything, he denied Audrey's statement. Tarot cards actually belong to this kind of tool. It uses more symbols and more reasonable elements to help us interpret tips more conveniently and accurately. Zhou Mingrui seems to be careless, but in fact he listens very carefully, but the phenomenon of his mental emptiness begins to become serious, and his head aches. I see. Audrey nodded her approval, and then stressed. That's not what I meant. I'm not questioning the tarot cards. I heard that Roselle the Great actually made another deck of cards, which were hidden and symbolized some unknown forces. There were 22 cards in all. After that, he invented the 22 main cards of the tarot cards as a game tool with reference to this. Is this accurate? She looked at Zhou Mingrui as if she wanted to get an answer from the mysterious Mr. Fool. Zhou Mingrui just smiled, didn't speak, and turned his attention to hanging upside down. To test your appearance, Alger subconsciously straightened his back. A voice said, Yes, it is said that Roselle the Great has seen the desecration of Slate, and that deck of cards contains the secrets of the 22 ways of God. 22 ways of God. Audrey repeated in a tone full of longing. At this time, Zhou Mingrui's headache intensified, and he felt that the invisible connection between himself and the crimson stars and the gray fog began to shake. Well, that's all for today's party. He immediately decided and spoke in a low voice. Follow your will. Alger bowed his head and saluted. Follow your will. Audrey imitated, hanging upside down. She still has a lot of questions and ideas, and she is completely reluctant to end it. Zhou Mingrui broke contact, while laughing laugh. Let's look forward to the next party. When the stars shine again, the crimson light shrinks back like water. As soon as Audrey and Alger hear the words of Mr. Fool, their figures become more blurred and illusory. In less than a second, the projection was broken and silence was restored over the fog. Zhou Mingrui felt that he was getting heavier and heavier, and he was wandering around. At first, his eyes were dark, and then the bright sunshine. He is still in the apartment, still standing in the middle. It's like a dream. What the hell is that foggy world? And who or what kind of power made the change just now? Zhou Mingrui sighed in a low voice, full of confusion, and his legs went to the desk like they were filled with lead. He picked up the pocket watch he had put outside before to confirm how long it had passed. 1-to-1 time flow rate. Zhou Mingrui probably judged. Putting down his pocket watch, he couldn't support himself any longer. So he sat down in the chair, lowered his head and massaged his temples with his left thumb and middle finger. After a long time, he suddenly sighed and said in Chinese, It seems that in a short period of time is can't go back. Only the ignorant can be fearless, see such magical things. And after learning about the extraordinary field and mysterious world, Zhou Mingrui dare not rashly try. The transfer ceremony in ancient Saxon and Luen, who knows if there will be another situation, perhaps more bizarre, more horrible, and even make people wish they were dead. At least you have to have a deep grasp of the occult before you can try. Zhou Mingrui thought helplessly. Fortunately, the so-called party can help you. There was another silence, and he said to himself with depression, loss, pain, and melancholy. From now on, I am Klein. Klein tried to turn his thoughts back to methods and plans to relieve his negative emotions. Next week, we may be able to hear the formula of audience. The party just now is really amazing. People in different parts of the world turned thousands of miles into a stone's throw and exchanged needed goods face to face. Well, it's a little familiar. Klein lung for a few seconds, sudden heart, hand on the temple, while self-deprecating in a low voice. What about the online dating platform? Chapter 8 New Era Who? The wind howled, the rainstorm was like a note, and the three-masted sailboat fluctuated between one wave peak after another, just like a toy thrown and caught by a giant. Alger Wilson's crimson eyes faded, and he found himself still standing on the deck, no different from before. Then he saw the odd-looking glass bottle in his palm crack and break, frosted and melted into the raindrops. After just 2 or 3 seconds, this ancient wonder completely lost its traces that once existed. A hexagonal crystal snowflake appeared in the palm of Alger's hand, then quickly faded until it disappeared, as if it had shrunk into flesh and blood. Alger seems to be thinking about what kind of invisible nodded. Silent for 5 minutes, he turned around and walked to the cabin entrance. Just as he was about to enter, he met a man who was also wearing a robe embroidered with lightning patterns. This man with soft yellow hair stopped, looked at Alger, stretched out his right hand, clenched his fist on his chest and said, "The storm is with you. The storm is with you." Alger's rough and profound face holds the right boxing left chest without any superfluous emotion. After saluting each other, Alger entered the cabin and walked down the aisle to the captain's room in the distance. Along the way, he didn't meet any sailors or crew members. It was as quiet as the inside of a grave. The door of the master's cabin opened, and the soft and thick dark brown carpet appeared in front of him, with bookshelves and wine cabinets on both sides, books with yellowish covers and bottles of dark red wine shining strangely under the glow of candles. There is a bottle of ink, a quill pen, a black metal telescope, and a sextant made of brass on the desk where candles are placed. Behind the desk, a pale middle-aged man wearing a skull cap looked at Alger step by step, gritted his teeth angrily, and said, I won't give in. I believe you can do it. Alger calmly seemed to say that the weather is not very good today. The middle-aged man was shocked, as if he didn't expect such an answer. At this moment, Alger body slightly bow, suddenly rushed forward, instantly closed the distance between two people to only the desk. Bang! His shoulders tightened, his right hand jerked out and grabbed the middle-aged man's throat. Without giving the other party a chance to react, pieces of unreal fish scales appeared on the back of his hand, and his 5 fingers worked hard wildly. Click! In the ringing sound, the middle-aged man's eyes were big, and his body was lifted by the hole. His feet twitched violently, but he quickly recovered his composure. His eyes were at a loss, his pupils began to diverge, and his crotch position gradually became moist, and there was a stench coming out. Alger raised the middle-aged man, bent down, pedaled away, and approached the wall next to him. Bang! He used the middle-aged man as a shield and slammed into the front, his arms thick as a monster. The wooden walls were broken, and the violent wind and rain swept in with the fishy smell of seawater. Alger wriggled his back, threw the middle-aged man out of the cabin, and threw him into the huge waves one after another like a mountain peak. The sky is dark, the wind and rain roar, and the great power of nature buries everything. Alger took out a white handkerchief, wiped his right hand carefully, and then threw it into the seat. Stepping back, he waited patiently for his companion to enter. What's the matter? In less than 10 seconds, the man with soft yellow hair just rushed in. The captain has escaped. Alger gasped and replied with annoyance. He still retains some extraordinary power. Damn it! The blonde man cursed in a low voice. He came to the crevasse and stared into the distance, but he could see nothing but wind, rain, and waves. Forget it. He's just incidental. The blonde man waved his arm. We can only take credit for finding this Tudor ghost ship. Even if he is a close relative of the sea, he dare not dive into the water rashly in this weather, and if the storm continues, the captain won't last long. Alger nodded and found that the crevasse on the wooden wall began to creep back at the speed visible to the naked eye. He took a deep look, turned his head subconsciously, and looked at the position of the rudder and sail. He can clearly know the situation there even if he is separated by heavy boards. No first mate, no second mate, no crew, no sailors, not even living people. There was nothing there, and the rudder and sails were strangely adjusting themselves to mind and emerged the whole body. Shrouded in gray fog, fool. Alger suddenly let out a sigh. He turned to look at the wind and waves outside, talking with expectation and fear. A new era has begun. Backlinde, the capital of the Kingdom of Rouen, Queens. Audrey Hall pinched her cheek, unable to believe what had just happened. On the dresser in front of her, the old bronze mirror was broken into pieces. Looking down, Audrey saw a crimson flowing on the back of her hand, like a tattoo of a star. Crimson gradually fades and finally hides in the skin and disappears. It was not until this time that Audrey was sure that she was not dreaming. Oh, flow in her eyes. Corners of her mouth become warped a little, and she couldn't help standing up and bending down to put on her skirt. With a salute to the air, Audrey walked briskly, turned her body, and danced the most popular, ancient elf dance. In the current court, the figure is graceful, and her face is full of bright smiles. Knock, knock, knock. The bedroom door was suddenly knocked at. Who? Audrey brushed and stopped, posing gracefully. Young lady, may I come in? You should get ready, asked the maid at the door. Audrey looked at the mirror of the dresser and quickly converged her smile, leaving only a shallow touch. She left to see right to see, confirm the image without any problems before gently opening. Come on in, with a twist of her hand, and her maid pushed through the door. Oh, it's broken. Annie saw the end of the ancient bronze mirror at a glance. Audrey blinked and said slowly, well, yes, well, Susie came in before. You know, it always likes to destroy. Susie is a big golden retriever with a less pure pedigree. It was a gift from her father Earl Hall when he bought a foxhound, but it was very popular with Audrey. You have to teach it a good lesson. And is familiar with cleaning up the pieces of bronze mirror, for fear of hurting the young lady. After all this, she looked at Audrey and asked with a smile, which skirt do you want to wear? Audrey thought for a moment and said, I like the one designed by Mrs. Ginnia for my 17th birthday. No. Others will say whether the Hall family has suffered a financial crisis, and a skirt is actually worn for the second time on a formal occasion. Annie shook her head in denial, but I really like it. Audrey toned gently stress. You can wear it at home and on less formal occasions. And assumed a non-negotiable attitude towards the matter. That's the one that Mr. Sides sent the day before yesterday, and the one with ruffled cuffs. Audrey took a hidden breath and kept an elegant and sweet smile. Your eyes are always so good. Annie stepped back with a smile and shouted to the door, Number 6 cloakroom. Forget it. I'll get it myself. The maids began to get busy. One was in charge of long skirts, one was in charge of jewelry, one was in charge of shoes, one was in charge of gauze hats, one was in charge of makeup for Miss Audrey, and the other was considering hairstyles. As the preparations drew to a close, Earl Hall, wearing a dark brown vest, appeared at the door. He wore a hat of the same color, had two beautiful mustaches, and his blue eyes were full of smiles. However, his flabby muscles, bulging belly, and obvious decree lines all ruthlessly destroyed his handsome when he was young. The most dazzling gem in Backlander. We should set off. Earl Hall stood at the entrance and tapped the open door twice. Dad, don't call me that. Audrey stood up with the help of the maid, deliberately showing a somewhat distressed look. Then, my beautiful little princess, it's time to go. Earl Hall folded his left arm and motioned for Audrey to hold it. Audrey chuckled, shook his head. This is the position of Mrs. Hall, the Countess, my dear mother. That way. Earl Hall smiled and folded his right arm again. This is the pride of being a father. Port Pulitzer, Oak Island, Royal Naval Base. When Audrey took her father's arm off the carriage, she was suddenly shocked by the behemoth in front of her. Not far from the military port, there is a towering huge ship with metal light shining all over it. It has no sails, only a watchtower, two towering chimneys, and two open-air turrets. It is so majestic and huge that the windsurfing battleships parked nearby are like newborn dwarfs surrounding Gent. The storm is on. Oh, my lord. Armored ship. One after another. She marveled at the low interweaving, and Audrey felt the same shock. It was a miracle created by human beings, an unprecedented marine miracle. I don't know how long it took for the nobles, ministers, and MPs to recover. At this time, a black spot in the air changed from small to large, gradually occupying a third of the sky, occupying everyone's line of sight, making the atmosphere suddenly solemn. This is a giant floating in midair. It has extremely smooth and graceful lines, and is painted in dark blue as a whole. The solid and light alloy skeleton supports the cotton cloth with hydrogen gas bag, and the box body with organic muzzle, projectile mouth and flat muzzle is hung below it. The exaggerated hum of the high phlogiston steam engine and the crazy rotation sound of the tail blades constitute a shocking movement. The king's family arrived in an empty boat, with the majesty of overlooking everything. A sword of judgment badge with a ruby crown on its handle reflects sunlight on both sides of the compartment, which is a symbol of the long history of the Augustus family dating back to the last generation. Audrey has not yet reached the age of 18 and has not participated in the introduction ceremony. Under the guidance of the queen, she officially entered the social occasions in Backlander and declared her adulthood. She can only watch and sit quietly, and I can't get close. However, she didn't care too much and even felt relaxed because she didn't have to face the princes. The miracle of human conquest of the sky landed steadily. The first young guards who came down from the escalator were heroic and vigorous. They wore red military dresses, white trousers, decorated belts and rifles, and lined up in 2 rows, waiting for the appearance of King George III and the Queen, Prince and Princess. Audrey has never seen a big shot before and has no interest in it. Instead, she looks around at the 2 black knights who are like statues around the king. In this age of steel, steam and guns, there are even guys who insist on wearing full body armor. The cold metallic luster and the deep black helmet give people a feeling of heaviness, majesty, and obedience. Is it a higher sequence of Punishment Night? Audrey's heart flashed a few words when the elders chatted at home, and she was thoughtful, but she was afraid to get close. With the arrival of the king's family, the ceremony finally began, and the current prime minister, Lord Augustin Nigan, walked in front of everyone. He is a member of the Conservative Party. So far, he is the only big man who has become a prime minister as a non-aristocrat. He was awarded the Lord for his outstanding contribution. Of course, Audrey knows more. Augustin's brother, the main supporter of the Conservative Party, is called Pallas Negan, the Duke of Negan of this generation. Augustin is in his 50s, tall and thin, with sparse hair and sharp eyes. After looking around, he said, "Ladies and gentlemen, I believe you have seen that this is an armored ship, which is enough to subvert the era of armored ships. It is 101 meters long and 21 meters wide. The Gao Qian ship's side is designed. The main armor belt is 457 millimeters thick and has a displacement of 10,060 tons. There are 4 305 millimeters main guns before and after, and there are 6 rapid-fire guns, 12 6-pound guns, 18 6-tube machine guns, and 4. It will be the real overlord, and it will conquer the sea." Aristocrats, ministers, and parliamentarians are in turmoil, and the description of the prime minister alone is enough to make them imagine the horror of this armored ship, not to mention the real thing is in sight. Augustin smiled a little, made a few more speeches, and then saluted King George III. "Your Majesty, please name it. From the port of Pulitzer, let's call it Pulitzer." George III looked quite cheerful. Pulitzer. Pulitzer. Starting from the Minister of the Navy and Commander-in-Chief of the Royal Navy, the name spread in turn and finally came to the armored ship, where officers and soldiers cheered in unison. Pulitzer? In the atmosphere of celebration, salutes rang off, and George III gave the order to set sail and test fire. Two. The whistle sounded, thick smoke spewed from the chimney, and the movement of mechanical operation was faintly audible. The monster set sail, and everyone was shocked when it sailed out of the port and bombarded the uninhabited island ahead with two main guns at the bow. Boom.
Boom.
Boom. The earth seemed to be shaking. The dust rushed into the air, and the hurricane swept away and set off waves. Prime Minister Aguizid turned with satisfaction and said to the nobles, ministers, and parliamentarians, "From now on, the 7 pirates who call themselves generals and the 4 pirates who usurp the throne can only tremble and wait for the end. Their time is over. Even if they have more or less extraordinary power, ghosts or cursed ships, the only ones that can cross the ocean are armored ships." At this time, the chief secretary of Aguizid deliberately asked, "Then they can't build their own armored ships?" Some nobles and members of parliament nodded secretly, thinking that this possibility could not be ruled out. Aguizid immediately smiled and shook his head slowly. "Impossible. Never. Building such an armored ship requires 3 large-scale coal-steel complexes, more than 20 steel mills, 60 scientists and more senior engineers from Backlander Artillery Research Institute and Pulitzer Ship Research Institute, 2 royal shipyards and nearly 100 parts factories affiliated to them, an admiralty, a shipbuilding committee, a cabinet, a firm king with excellent vision, and a great country with an annual output of 12 million tons of steel. Pirates can never do it." Speaking of which, he paused, then raised his arms and shouted, "Ladies and gentlemen, the era of giant ships and cannons has come." Chapter 9 notes: after half an hour's rest, Zhou Mingrui, who thought he was Klein, recovered, during which he found that there were 4 black spots on the back of his right hand, which just formed a small square. These 4 black spots fade from deep to light and soon disappear, but Klein knows that they are still hidden in his body, waiting to wake up. At 4 o'clock, square. Is it 4 corners for staple food? In the future, I don't need to prepare staple food, so I can go directly to the pace and mantra? Klein vaguely had a guess. It seems good, but it's always scary to have a little more strange and ignorant things. When I think of the inexplicable magic on the earth that can actually produce effects here, the strange crossing in my sleep, the mysterious, psychedelic, foggy world that I don't know what it represents, and the whispering of rituals that makes people close to madness. Klein shuddered uncontrollably and shuddered in the hot weather at the end of June. He once heard a saying, "The oldest and strongest emotion of human beings is fear, and the oldest and strongest fear is fear of the unknown." Now, he deeply understands a fear from the unknown to unprecedented and unstoppable. He has a strong impulse to get in touch with the mysterious field, learn more, and get rid of the unknown. And he also has the escape idea of burying his head and pretending that nothing has happened. Outside the window, the sun was shining, which covered the desk with a layer of gold powder. Klein stared at it as if he had touched a trace of warmth and hope. He relaxed a little and immediately felt a surge of exhaustion. Last night sleepless, just consumption, let his eyelids heavy like lead white. Can't stop drooping. Shook his head. Klein stretched out his hand and shored up the edge of the table. Without picking up the rye bread placed in the 4 corners, he stumbled to the front of the bunk bed. As soon as he lay down, he touched the pillow and fell asleep. Gollum. Gollum. Hunger woke Klein. He opened his eyes and felt refreshed. "It hurts a little besides my head." He rubbed his forehead and sat up, feeling that he could eat a whole cow now. He straightened out the folds of his clothes, returned to his desk, and picked up the silvery white pocket watch with branches and vines. Bang. The lid bounced off and the second hand ticked away. At 12:30, I slept for more than 3 hours. Klein swallowed and put his pocket watch in his linen shirt pocket. In the northern mainland, a day is also divided into 24 hours, 60 minutes per hour and 60 seconds per minute. As for whether the length of each second is the same as that of the earth, Klein is uncleared for him at this moment. Even words such as mysticism, ceremony, and the world of fog can't enter his mind. The most important thing at present is food. Food. Only when you're full can you find a way to do things. Without hesitation, Klein took back the rye bread in 4 corners, shook off a little dust, and planned to take one of them as the staple food at noon, because there is a custom of sharing offerings after sacrifice in his hometown, and these 4 loaves of rye bread don't seem to have changed at all. With only 5 pence left in his pocket, he feels that he should be thrifty, of course. This also has the subtle influence of the original owner memento mori and living habits. Because gas is too expensive, it hurts to use it for lighting. He moved out of the stove and added some coal. Klein paced back and forth, waiting for the water to boil. That rye bread will choke if you eat it dry. Do you want to live a life of brown bread in the morning, brown bread at noon, and meat at night? No. If Melissa hadn't considered my upcoming interview, I would have eaten meat twice a week. Klein, who was idle and unable to think seriously because of hunger, looked around. His eyes looking at the cupboard seemed a little green at the thought of the pound of lamb. No. We have to wait for Melissa to eat together. Klein shook his head suddenly, denying the idea of cutting half first and doing it now. As a wandering single dog in a big city, although he mainly eats out, he has honed his basic cooking skills, which is not delicious, but it is enough. Turning around, Klein intends to be out of sight, but at this moment, he suddenly remembers that he bought tender peas and potatoes in addition to meat in the morning. Potatoes. Klein was inspired in an instant, twisted back like a whirlwind, rushed to the cupboard, and took out 2 of the few potatoes. He first went to the public toilet to clean the skins of potatoes, and then put them directly into the pot and boiled them with water. After a while, he took out the seasoning box from the cupboard, opened the lid, and sprinkled a little yellow and rough salt into the water. After waiting patiently for a few minutes, Klein lifted the kettle, poured the soup that was not soup into several cups, poured it into a big bowl, and finally forked out 2 potatoes and put them on the table. He peeled off a little skin and blew on his hands, and the smell of cooked potatoes spread out little by little, which was appetizing. The saliva was secreted crazily, and Klein did not consider peeling only half of it, and the potato was still a little hot, so he picked it up and took a bite. Powder. Sweet. The mouth is sweet. Klein's heart was filled with emotion in an instant. He wolfed down 2 potatoes and even ate some skins. Until this time, he picked up a big bowl and took a delicious sip of soup, and the faint salty taste washed away the dry hair of his mouth. When I was a child, I loved to eat this way. Klein, who had a padded stomach, silently sighed, broke rye bread and softened it with soup. Perhaps the previous ceremony was too expensive, and he ate 2 full pieces, a whole pound. After drinking soup and cleaning up, Klein felt completely alive and experienced the happiness of being born and enjoying the sunshine. He sat back at his desk and began to think about what he should do next. You can't escape. You must find a way to get in touch with the mysterious field and become an extraordinary person in the mouth of justice and upside down. To overcome the fear caused by the unknown. At present, the only way is to wait for the next party and see if you can hear the formula of the audience, potion, or other mysterious knowledge. There are still 4 days until Monday. Before that, we have to face up to the problem of the original owner itself. Why did he commit suicide, and what happened to him? Unable to cross back, Klein, who patted his ass and left, picked up the spread-out notebook, intending to look through any clues to see if he